All right. Hi, everyone. 10 minutes is going to go by fast for me. I can tell you that right now. My name is Jasmine Fluker. And honestly, I drove in from Houston yesterday and I had a really great note card system and my hotel wouldn't print. So walk with me. So let me start by saying this. I come from a long line of people who like to talk. I am a multi-generational yapper. Um, so I grew up in a boisterous Southern family. I am from Mobile, Alabama. I live in Houston now, but I have also lived in Buffalo, New York, New Orleans, Nashville, and Atlanta. Um, and so I kind of go where the spirit takes me. Okay, so if you know anything about trees, I grew up with a pecan tree in my yard. If you know anything about pecans, they don't fall until they're ready. And so I would wait under the storm and under the rain to get them. And I grew up like picking blackberries off the vine, eating plums in the yard, and going to my grandmother all the time. One thing about me, I became an executive director of a nonprofit before 30. And the first thing they did was give me a speaking coach. I was like, what's wrong with the way that I speak? Um, they wanted me to go to Ohio to study for a while to mellow out my accent. And I said no. So, one thing about it is the people who suggested that I needed to be edited. Now, I love professional development, but this was not professional development. This was change your identity and who you are. The goal was to smooth out my accent. The goal was to change the cadence in how I speak and the way I tell stories. And now it is the antithesis of my business. Um, I remember looking at the coach and saying, I'm just a girl from Alabama that cares a lot about education. And people gonna rock with her, they're gonna not. And I was able to become a 7-figure fundraiser just by being who I am. It wouldn't be tech if it was not doing what it want. Here's me and my grandmother. Like I said, I'm from a multi-generational family of yappers. If you go to my grandmother's house right now, you're leaving with pound cake, even if you don't want to. She doesn't care about my macros at all. And one thing that she taught me all the time is if you have a voice, you have a responsibility. She is from Selma, Alabama, and she was on the Pettus Bridge with MLK. And she always taught me that voice is super important. Storytelling is indeed strategy. I do this for foundations, nonprofits, and small business owners who want to be more clear with who they are and what their story is. Stories shape belief, they shape identity, they shape relationship, they shape power, and they also shape funding, ironically. They made me a really great storyteller. As we think about AI and where we're going now with AI and automation, every day I get online and I see this job is going to be gone because of AI. This job is they can't take my job because they can't be who I am. We cannot automate humanity. And I think that's the most expansive thing about storytelling. And if you are not using storytelling as a tool for whatever you're doing, I would implore you to do so. Am I off mute? So I am starting a podcast called Am I Off Mute? This is not my first podcast. I did one called Sick, Tired, Transcendent a couple years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago. But Am I Off Mute? I have interviewed a bunch of guests who are people in the workplace who have a story to tell about fat phobia or accent bias or othering of any kind. And so I've interviewed them all, and the podcast will be dropping pretty soon. One thing that's interesting about Am I Off Mute is it feels in the moment, because how many times have you been on Zoom and you're like, am I off mute? Can people hear me? And it feels as though your voice is stifled or you can't get off mute. And so I'm excited to bring a platform where people are able to be expansive in a way that does that. So, um, if you are interested in continuing with the getting to know the podcast or me, I'm always yapping on LinkedIn. I have 2 newsletters that reach about 3,000 readers every week. One is called The B-Sides, where I talk about stories that nobody really gives light to. And then one is called The Frame, where I talk about culturally relevant things that are happening in today's world. And I post it on LinkedIn where people feel like you shouldn't be yourself, and I really don't care. And then the second place you can find me is the Pivotal Paradigm Project website. Pivotal has been my baby for about 6 years, and I've grown it and really taken on my first 6 and 7-figure clients this year, which has been very beautiful and nice as a solopreneur. And then if you just are like, I want to be a part of the podcast when it drops, I also just have a sign up for me to capture your email so that I can do that as well. I do apologize. I feel like my time has been so short, but I'm glad that I got to share a little bit of me with you, and I'm going to stick around if you have any questions for me or you want to chat anymore. But thank you all so much.